A lot of the things that I'm telling you now, like 90% of this information, people don't know. Not even POC's hardcore fans, they don't even know about a lot of these things that we're chatting about right now.
Only one radio station has a Grandmaster of South African hip hop, South African hip hop, South African DJ Ready D.
Yeah, man, you got the power to make a change. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Tuesdays, it's all about making that change right here on the Ready D Show. It's 17 shots of hip-hop straight to the dome, and you are tuned into Group FM, connecting Cape Town City. Yeah, we are connecting you to hip-hop music.
DJ Ready D is a hip-hop icon, but very few people have ever heard all of the extraordinary stories behind the legacy of a man who has been crucial to the birth and growth of South African hip-hop. From facing apartheid guns to performing with James Brown and the Fugees, from Prophets of the City to Good Hope FM, and every remarkable moment in a revolutionary career, this is D unfolding his memories and perspectives in 3 parts. So what was life like both on the road and when you were just, I guess, in Cape Town as a member, an active member of Prophets of the City?
At the time, you know, as apartheid, as we know it, started coming to a close, POC, you know, we were still quite active touring. We spent little time in Cape Town though, you know, because the tours that we did was throughout the country practically, and we visited neighboring countries as well. We actually made it into Botswana as well, and Botswana, just on the outskirts between South Africa and Botswana. That's where we were. And we actually voted in Hillbrow, in Joburg. Yeah, that's where we. No, sorry, my bad. Yeovil. That's where we voted. Yeah, I clearly remember that day, and standing in all of those queues. You know, everybody just excited to go and vote, and just looking, you know, at just looking at the people, the amount of people that came out, the long queues, how integrated, you know, this queues were. It wasn't a situation where, you know, the blacks here, coloreds there, whites there. It was so integrated, and you could see South Africa was ready for the change as well. So that was really exciting times for us. And at that point, we were kind of ramping up, or at least bringing our tour to a close as well. And the one thing that I clearly remember, you know, I just want to backtrack for a short while. I remember one morning being woken up by this huge boom. I thought it was a earthquake hitting, because we stayed in like a little double-story house, and it had wooden floors. I'll never forget that. And we actually slept on the wooden floors as well. And I heard this massive freaking boom out of my sleep, and I actually thought, am I waking up next to the noon gun in Cape Town? The building, the walls vibrated, the floors vibrated, and everything else. And then shortly after that, newsflash, it was the big bomb that went off in Joburg city center. And this thing freaking blew such a huge crater in the city center. I was like, holy Lord, you can't be serious, you know, to actually wake up to something like that. So, you know, it was all these different, I would say, moments that was taking place, you know, so for us personally. So you're on the road, you're rehearsing, you're relocated, you're in a different space, you're in a different town. And you only got the crew as family practically, because you are so busy. There's no time really to socialize as well. We really relocated with all our music gear, the decks, the vinyls, everything, you know, went on tour with us. So you're constantly caught up in that circle and in that way of thinking. And then it's you know, trying to contend and contest with everything else that is taking place. And of course we're on edge, you know, because we were fully aware of the message that we were driving at that time. And we were busy recording the album called Age of Truth, and that album was very, very explicit with regards to how we felt about the political and the social conditions of the time as well. And yeah, when we made it eventually made it to the voting station, we had an American journalist with us as well from a magazine called The Source, and he was there to witness the whole process as well. And then, interesting enough, a call came in, and we were booked to play at Madiba's Inauguration, We were super amped, we were fired up, everybody was ready to go. Not long after that, another call came in. You guys are actually you're cancelled. Yeah, our manager put up such a huge fight. And all of this is happening while, there's this positive vibe and energy in the air. But I know what happened. I somehow think it was linked to the fact that word got out about Age of Truth and the content on that album, and they were afraid that we might perform that material. So if you at Madiba's inauguration, imagine you're rapping about Mangop, even if we record here, you're speaking about Chris Hani's assassination, and we're supposed to be at an event where you're celebrating, So they were afraid of those types of things as well. And I know that the Nationalist Party government, they won edge as well, because it was very dangerous for them as a party to have such a high-profile group, so-called colored group, now professing that they are actually black and coming with a black conscious message as well. And then we had two black members join the crew as well, so that didn't sit well, with the government at the time. So I understand why the bannings and why they decided to kick us off the inauguration gig. Anyway, our manager threw all his toys out of the cart. He put on the fight of his life. Then we received the call: you guys can perform at the inauguration, but you're not allowed to set up your decks, and you can't come out there. And practically they tried to discourage us. And we were like, okay, it's cool, we're not going to come with decks. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, we got Jasmo, the human beatbox that could beatbox and bring the beats. And that's exactly what we did. We went up there, Jasmo was beatboxing, we did our performance just to a beatbox, and he was performing with close to about 1 million people at the Union buildings. So for me, that was really overwhelming, and it was quite special as well. So in the background, it's FW de Klerk, and you're seeing Madiba in the background over there. So it's all these moments as well. And I just want to get back onto the Madiba topic once again. The other thing that's kind of entering my mind right now was on Madiba's release. I clearly remember POC being invited to perform in Elsie's River. That's when we met him for the first time. But my second memory is actually the one that kicks in. We were invited to perform at the sports stadium in Khayelitsha. And on that day, I drove into the arena with my Ford Cortina 30S over the grass. And all of a sudden, there's this convoy that comes in, and it's blue lights and people shouting and screaming and going wild. And I don't know what the heck is going on. Meanwhile, it's the Madiba motorcade that's coming in. I've never off-roaded with a Ford Cortina 30S before. I freaking put foot flat. I was like, bruh, I know that this could either be a celebration outcry right here, or this could be some heavy thing that's going down. So just make sure that you move. I eventually made it to the one side of the Khayelitsha sporting field, and yeah, Madiba comes in, the whole motorcade, everybody's out of the car, the crowd goes wild, the whole thing goes down, and that's our second meeting of Madiba as well. And that was really awesome.
Was that the same Ford Cortina that you would lug 40-50 kilograms
exactly
of vinyl to when you were starting out at Teasers?
That's the same Ford Cortina that we loaded with the vinyls.
You didn't even have time to get a better car. You were touring so hard for years and years.
That was it, man.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
What was the adrenaline rush like at the Union buildings? That must have been like, for me, I would have lost awareness of my body. It would have been surreal just looking at these faces.
For me, it was bittersweet personally, and I guess it was the same for the rest of the members, because we were stripped of artistic integrity. But thankfully, hip hop comes to the rescue, and we had a really talented beatboxer that could hold it together, so we could still do the performance as well. They thought they could silence us and block us from actually performing, and yet there we go. And interesting enough, and the irony is, we were then invited to perform at Becky's inauguration as well, years later. So it's just interesting how the universe works sometimes, But that experience was, it was really bittersweet. It was awesome, to know that we had such a huge event, and this means that we're now this is the turning point, for South Africa, for its people. From the artistic point of view, for me, that was like the really difficult part to deal with, because unfortunately, as an artist, whether you are painting, you're doing poetry, or you're doing sculpture, anything artistic, we can become so caught up and emotional. If people tamper with your art, you're not allowed the room to to express yourself, and people actually put up all these stumbling blocks. It becomes very personal, and it's hard to deal with. So I still feel it from that perspective, but thankfully we managed to pull it off. It was a successful event, and from there on life went on for us. Shortly after that, a group called Fundamental from the UK came to Johannesburg, and they linked up with us. And these guys are super radical. I think that POC was pretty mild compared to what these guys were about. They were like POC, Public Enemy, NWA, Ice Cube, plus the most, I would say, intense revolutionary movement, all wrapped up into one. The performance intense, the music intense, the message intense, the album artwork explicit in your face. It's some of the most shocking imagery you could see, but it's all things that deals with reality and the situation in the world, whether it was starvation, bias against sex, race, religion, economy, warfare, all these things. And through our meeting with this group, Fundamental, we were blessed enough to get a record deal in the UK, and that's where we recorded Universal Soldiers, and that was the transition for POC to go worldwide with our performances on a regular basis. And from there on, the tour started. We recorded the albums. We ended up throughout East Europe. We were behind the Berlin Wall in Eastern Europe before the wall came down. Believe it or not, we had Nazis as bodyguards. How's that for ironic? Yeah, we were in East Berlin, we were in West Berlin. That's some of the most memorable moments. Of course, most of Western Europe at the time, and we ended up in Scandinavia, having
and
the biggest.
Huge in Copenhagen.
Copenhagen, Denmark, all the way up in Norway, Oslo, but the biggest following was even further north. That was all the way up in Trondheim. And Trondheim was one of the earliest Viking cities. And I'm like, look at this. There's a group that comes from Cape Town, the Cape Flats, caught up in the issues that we have to deal with locally, but look where's the stronghold and look where's the fan base, So once again, the universe works in very, very interesting ways.
So did you feel a shift in your creative process with apartheid ending? Because there are many systemic, awful things that were not ended with a simple change of government. But many of your explicit anti-apartheid messages that happened on the earlier albums, maybe, did they feel as relevant? Like, did your writing process change?
In all honesty, nothing changed. During our interviews at the time, and if you listen to the music, and you got to go from song to song and follow the pattern. Our hopes were always that our liberators don't become our oppressors. And it's quite interesting because if you listen to a song like Dala Flat, for instance, that song speaks about the social challenges, the oppression and suppression. It speaks about gang violence. It speaks about life, just the basics. We touch on religion. We're breaking, or at least we touching on what's taboo or known as being taboo in certain sectors of our community. And if you look at the situation and what's happening in our communities today, it's still relevant. All the things we were chatting about, you might as well have recorded that song today and it would still be relevant as well. And with so many other, other songs where we delivered all these different messages and forms of expression, is still so much that's relevant. And for us, a lot of what we did was kind of, if you want to wrap it up into a very, very basic term, it was all based on hope. Hope and pray. Hoping and praying that things might improve, and warning people, if you allow yourself to be oppressed again, of course we will then be going back, to where we've come from as well. And with the Age of Truth as well, the reason why that album was really, really explicit, we were at this point where we were talking about this age and being able to speak a truth and not being afraid to express, you know, what you're truly feeling and what you are experiencing and how life just across sectors kind of affect you as well. And part of that, the album, from the creative aspect, the music, the texture, where we went creatively with that album, that was even more intense, because the violence in society, the violence that we experience, the things that we've seen in the news, all of those things became more amplified. It became more and more intense. So that affected us from a psychological and emotional standpoint, and of course that now becomes translated through your artwork as well, you know, and in terms of what you're doing from the artistic perspectives as well. Because there's some songs and certain things that we've done on that album, if I listen back to it, I'm like, holy Lord, what did you guys say? What did you do, you know?
And what kind of headspace were you in such that those lyrics made so much sense when you wrote them?
The headspace we were in, we were paranoid. We were angry. We were waiting for the change, and we were hoping for the change. The change couldn't have come soon enough, because a part of the greater change, if you want to call it, Madiba coming out, his stand to become president of South Africa, we were still concerned about other problems: the gang violence, the poverty, job creation, abuse, racism, being fully conscious that racism is not going to fly out of the door overnight. We've got lots of work to do, and we are going to have to find a way to make this impression and to teach the next generation to come to understand what it's all about as well. And we knew, in terms of the economy and where things are going, and being conscious of how things work on economic level to a very sort of basic extent, but at least you could see it and you could feel it. And for us, our concern was, if people are not properly educated and people don't go in there with a clean intention and the right motives, of course the masses are going to rebel. And look what's happening today, you know. So a lot of what's happening today was all part of our concern then, you know. And I think that's the reason why the music and the thinking is still relevant, you know, because you can flip through any song and you can go, holy crap, these bras are talking about what's going on today. And in certain instances, people were like, but how did you know? You know, it's not like
Prophets of the city.
Yeah, we didn't prophesize anything. Once again, it was just that it was just that hope, and it was just that prayer. And it's not a case of trying to point fingers and playing the blame game and so forth, you know. For us, it was just a case of, man, we can't go through life forever in victim mode, you know. Yes, we've been oppressed. Yes, we've been forced what was known as Bantu education. Yes, labels were imposed on us as well. But you got to reach a point where you got to take it upon yourself to create that change as well. You got to elevate yourself. The change starts with you as an individual. Then somehow that change and that way of thinking and that feeling and that energy must then be transmitted within the family environment. And once it's in the family environment, it then becomes community based, and then we can say it's gonna, hopefully we can create this chain reaction, and we can create a change in the city and then in the country, and hopefully we can influence our neighbors. You know, I know it sounds very idealistic to a certain degree, but that was the hope, you know. And for me personally, I'm still very optimistic about life, and thankfully, in terms of where I am right now and the people that we've met along this journey, they were the reason why we could be optimistic as well, apart from all the anger that we felt as well, because we met awesome people on the journey, whether they were musicians, teachers, spiritual leaders, men, women, you know, from all over the world as well. And that was the blessing, and that was really the benefits of traveling as well. You see your country, you see your community, and you see yourself from a completely different perspective as well, and you got a better understanding of how you fit in as well, you know. And it encourages you to always humble yourself, and you always got to be prepared to learn, because hip-hop can really encourage you to be super arrogant as well, you know. And unfortunately, we were at that point where we made mistakes. We've we were caught up in contradictions. It's natural, we're humans as well. But thankfully, through the guidance of so many people, they could at least help us grow, in a certain instance as well. So, that was, a huge part of that journey. It's experiencing all these things.
It must have been wild to go from a state of paranoia and stress at the end of apartheid, desperately hoping that things would turn out fine. I mean, it was virtually a civil war in South Africa at that time. So dangerous, people dying all around you. Then Mandela coming in and waiting for the change, and then kind of being geographically removed by going on tour in Europe and being in a completely foreign environment, and I guess hearing what was happening in South Africa, but being distant from that, and then being overwhelmed by touring and sleeping on your way to Paris, and then waking up and performing, then waking up and performing. It must have been a completely different mental shift.
Man, it was touring and having to deal with your paranoia, where we experienced that. And it became clear how paranoid we were, South Africans, was in Switzerland one year. We were invited by the organization that hired us to perform in Switzerland. They took us out for lunch. We had our bags and our jackets in the car. And when we got out to go to the restaurant to go and eat, we were like taking all our baggage and luggage and stuff with us, and they were like, don't worry, you can leave it there. And we're like, no, I want everything with me. And they're like, don't worry, everything is safe in Switzerland. And we're like, no, you can't be serious. Nowhere in the world can things be safe. And they're like, don't worry, I promise you, if anything happens, you'll be compensated. And for us, that was the paranoia. And we walked, and I'm like, but aren't you gonna lock the car? You're supposed to lock the car because this is abnormal, we don't know these types of things, so that's how it affects you, and I mean, that's only our story. Imagine so many other people that had to go, overseas, and you kind of find yourself in a very, very sort of different cultural setting, how that must have impacted you just from, and just your, your mental state and your emotional state. How you had to deal, with things from that perspective, and traveling to all these places. It was hard to deal with. It was really, really, really hard to deal with until you've been around the block for so many times, and now you actually feel a little bit comfortable. And the minute the plane lands and you get off that plane, and you're looking at the buildings and all the reminders of what apartheid has done, boom, there your paranoia shoots back up again. Your stress levels is up. There's freaking hand on the trigger. You know what's happening, who's coming, it's that type of situation again. And then you're all beady-eyed again, So, yeah, that was the apartheid dynamic, for us. Yeah.
I imagine it's almost difficult when you're in South Africa even now to switch off that mentality and to try and have a Sunday lunch, like be normal with your family, because of the psychological toll that so many days, so many months and years of fighting and trying to survive in that role. It must have almost been traumatic.
No, 100%. I mean, our message has always been, our message goes out to everybody, whether you're coming from a disadvantaged background or you are well off, as people would say, or you're very successful, you're super rich. You can afford the big houses in Houghton. You can afford the big houses in Constantia.
The castle walls.
I'm telling you got the highest walls with electric fences. You got the bodyguards. You got the whole thing. You're living in neighborhoods that are blocked off. Our point was always, you gotta come out from behind your walls at some point. You gotta go to the airport. You gotta go do your shopping. You gotta go A, B, C, D, and E. So my problem can become your problem, because now you're pulling up to a robot. I'm desperate. I don't have work. I've been oppressed. Of course, I'm not in a healthy mind state. I want to survive, and because of my situation and the predicament I've been put in, and that was my growing up, the only thing that I got on my mind is smash and grab, and how I can get, how I can get or steal whatever I can, or whatever, in order for me to survive. I'm not trying to justify that. That's wrong by all means, but unfortunately it happens, and it still happened up until today as well, And if you look at gang violence, I mean, that is one of my main concerns as well. A lot of young people resort to gangs because they feel, there's a sense of family, belonging, worth, and importance over there. People acknowledge them, people respect them, and they can't find decent jobs. So what else is there to do? If that is what apartheid has encouraged and has bred all the years, and coupled with an educational system that doesn't work, and everything else around you is breaking down, what do we expect? And that's why I say it doesn't matter who you are. If you're South African, my problem is your problem in some form or fashion, and it's a really, really sad thing to say. And I'm always telling people we are so blessed to live in Cape Town City, probably the most beautiful city on the planet with the most awesome people ever. And the thing that makes the city even more special is that we have so many people from so many different cultures and backgrounds and races and all these things. There's this potential for us to move forward in such a way where we can actually become the global example. Number one, we got the location going for us. We got the culture going for us. We got the intelligence going for us. We got so many people doing phenomenal things. So it's how do we manage to bring all of those aspects together, but I firmly believe it's got to come from a truthful place. It can't come from an opportunist sort of. It can't come from, I would say, that direction. It's got to come from a pure intent and from a principle sort of point of view. That's how we got to implement, these things.
And one of the principles that Prophets of the City took for that purpose and that vision was to espouse black consciousness. Can you talk a little bit about why that decision was made?
With regards to black consciousness, for us, that was just growth. We were influenced by a lot of the black conscious hip hop that came out of the USA. Public Enemy came out with It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. NWA came out with Straight Out of Compton. And if we listen to what these guys were talking about, it's exactly the same things that we experienced over here as well. We listened to what Africa Bambaataa had to say and his thinking and philosophy behind organizations such as the Zulu Nation to celebrate African pride and heritage and to make people aware of their history. And we're like, a lot of that people, they are making an effort to understand their history, but we are living in Africa. We are living in Cape Town. We are in this environment. We are caught up, between everything that is happening over here. And if you look at what's happening around us, we needed to have a better understanding of that as well. And I got to credit Shaheen though. He was the lead rapper, one of the co-producers for Prophets of the City. He was a political activist at school as well. So for me, engaging with Shaheen, he practically encouraged me, to start thinking a little bit more deeply about my role in society as well. And that eventually led to the, if you want to call it, to the black consciousness way of thinking, And we spent a lot of times at seminars, at meetings, interacting with people, reading up, on history. And even when we toured abroad as well, we ended up on a lot of festivals that celebrated Africa as well. In the UK, we spent a lot of time with Muslims as well, that of African descent as well. So we spent a lot of time in all of these different settings, and that helped us just to be a little bit more connected, if you want to call that, because in the beginning days, we always tried to emulate the Western way of doing things, and that kind of brought us back, to understanding how we had to deal with what was going over here and to truly understand where we fit in as well. And through that journey and that type of interactions with people, that of course influenced our lyrics as well and the music as well, because we felt this very we felt this deep need to connect with Africa on all levels, on all levels, and through that we can explore everything else, to try and find how do we connect, or what's our true role as human beings, so that also led us not to align ourselves with any political parties. We took a very, very neutral stance at that time. Whenever we did events, we always looked at the intent and how POC being at an event or an occasion is going to benefit the people that was actually there. So that was always our motive. So if you were true about liberating the community and the people, of course we would be there, to support that. So yeah, all of that was part of this whole sort of black consciousness way of thinking and acting as well.
And you guys were pioneers for hip-hop in South Africa, but it seems to me, and I'd love you to talk about this, that you did so much collaboration with other South African forms, and you came out with, you talked about having Umbakanga music as a part of your own creative process. I think you collaborated with Kwaito Stars at different times.
That's right. Yeah.
So, you were producing and bleeding into all these different truly South African forms and creating a South African form of hip-hop, yeah?
In terms of what we've created, it was never an intent. We didn't want to become the leaders or the pioneers or try and force what we did on anyone else. Our thinking was we just needed to have a much deeper hip-hop experience for us. And the minute we understand, we got the nick of how to sample and compose and program the beats and take control of the productions. We wanted to go into that sound even more. But fortunate for us, we were exposed to so many different sounds growing up as well. All the members, Shane was exposed to jazz. He was exposed to Robbie Jansen. He was exposed to Jonathan Butler and all these guys because of his dad being a huge profile musician, So he had that type of influence. The same for me. Growing up in District 6, I was exposed to disco, reggae, funk, the klopse music, the church choirs, all these different types of things. So when we reached a point where we could personally start producing beats, we experimented, and that explains the Guma influence in our music. That explains, the Maklanga sound in the music as well. And some of our early shows, we actually did live shows with bands like Amampondo. They are a traditional African marimba band as well. So they perform with the xylophones, the horns. They come in the full African traditional garb, no Western sort of dress or whatever the case may be. And here you're finding these guys with decks and beatboxes and hip-hop dances, fusing the music with, such bands. We interacted and we recorded with Robbie Jansen as well. We did a collaboration and a remix of one of PJ Powers' songs as well, so that is the extent, in terms of the types of collaborations that we did. So you're finding yourself in all this really interesting, I would say, sort of situations. And when Kwaito music came along, of course, we had to find ourselves immersed in that as well. So in the early days of Ghetto Rough Records, that was kind of born out of POC. Ghetto Rough Records was born out of that experience as well. So Ghetto Rough was set up just after our tours, our international tours. We settled in South Africa. We wanted to set ourselves up. And Ghetto Rough eventually came up. It grew. The members of POC started going in their own directions. Shortly after that, we were back on the scene with BVK, with Brasa Van die Kap. And of course, that was built off the back of POC as well. Yeah.
And tell me a bit about some of the Kwaito collaborations that you got involved in, because you guys were staying in Joburg for a while, if I remember right.
That's right. Yeah, we were based in Yeovil. We spent a lot of time up in Hillbrow as well. And interesting enough, we actually saw the change in Hillbrow. We saw that change, physically saw that change take place as well, from when it was a sort of a suburb or an area or metropolis dominated by whites, and mostly Italians as well. And we witnessed firsthand the abuse that happened on the streets, because we were victimized as well. So as the change and the transition taking place, a lot of the people started to flee Hillbrow as well, and then people moved into the Yeovil area as well. So we found ourselves in Yeovil, setting up office over there, working from there. Ishmael and Junior, they were quite diverse as well. Junior, he was deeply into his reggae music. Ishmael loved R&B music as well. So we thought, let's do something around Ishmael and let's see how we could do something around Junior. Junior stepped out of the picture and he became involved with Boom Shaka. So he became the reggae artist or the ragamuffin artist within Boom Shaka. Ishmael then decided to form a quieter group, and he formed Scheme. So we produced some of Scheme's early works. We produced for a band called Tribe as well. I was involved with some of Ishmael's early works as well. And from there, based on the success of Scheme with their Vavas, J-Hit and Tribe and all these guys, the label grew. Then more artists came on board, and then it was Oudemeester that came on board, and then so many artists came through the doors, I can't even remember the names anymore. POC then took a completely different turn, and the guys felt it's now time for us to work in our individual capacities. I came back to Cape Town City. I connected with Mr. Fat, may his soul rest in peace. Another member known as Hammer, he's become a DJ right now, so it was the three of us, and we formed BVK, Prasse van die Kaap, and then BVK became the only hip-hop group on the Ghetto Rough label at that point in time. BVK eventually became an independent entity, and as Ghetto Rough grew, I started to still, do these collaborations with various artists. And I think the breaking, or should I say the breakout point for DJ Reddy D in the quieter scene was when I did a little bit of a remix of Mapaputsi's hit, Isinja. I think that was the track. And in the video, I was doing like a whole turntablist routine.
Doing your dance,
Yeah, I was going back and forth on the decks. And I think that kind of set it off as well. And that sort of helped boost my profile in its sort of individual sense as well.
So I have to ask you about this. When we first walked into this studio, you saw that Roland.
Oh, yeah.
And you lost your mind. And I mean, my experience of you is just as like this extraordinary institution, cool and calm as they come, and you've seen it all, and you were fanboying over this thing. You had no words for about 12 minutes except my gosh. So and then you talked about like how you were recording your early tracks on this. It only had an 8-second sampler. Please just tell me about it. It's just incredible.
Man, I'm telling you, when we started off producing, we had Shaheen's dad there, Mr. Isse Arifdin. He was the main producer because we couldn't operate the machines. And at that time, we didn't quite understand the concept of sampling as well. But we were listening to all these bands, Dr. Dre, NWA, all these guys coming through Marley Marl. He was actually one of the first producers, or actually the producer, that managed to figure out sampling. So of course, all of that is it's coming back to us in the music. And then we were hit with the Bomb Squad that produced Public Enemy's records, and the RZA, he produced Wu-Tang records as well. And we were so freaking jacked up to try and get to that point and to sample. And the most affordable machine was this Roland S50. I managed to get my hands on this machine. This thing's only got about 8 seconds of sampling, which means that there's like a split second for your bass drum, a split second for your snare drum, a split second for your hi-hat and all the other instruments. And then you could only, if you're lucky enough, you're going to get in a few more seconds either for a bass note or something, although it's got sounds built into it, but the sounds, it sounds extremely superficial. It lacks that soul and that dirtiness, because we used to sample directly from the vinyls, and we wanted the crackles, we wanted the dirt, we wanted that
real feel.
That's right, we wanted that vibrations that come off the needle and the hum. We wanted all of that messiness in the music, because that was the grime and the soul of the beats. And this particular machine just had that sound texture that was able to deliver that. The next machine that came after that was the W30, but we couldn't afford those machines, We were lucky enough then, in fact, Shaheen's dad, through his deals and whatever, he managed to buy the Roland S550, which is the big brother of this little S50 over here. And that thing gave us, I think, 25 seconds of sampling. So you're sitting there and you're sampling, and you end up with all these floppy disks. Hey, let me just see if I can get my hands on this. So I still got a huge case with all POC and BVK songs on them. 8 seconds.
Unreal.
All stuck on here. So you then got to export what's happening on the machine, and then you got to transfer that to a reel-to-reel. And we didn't have a huge multi-track recording facility as well. We only had 8 tracks at our disposal. So we had to constantly bump, and we had to learn to splice. And we had to get creative for the decks. And then in certain instances with the really complex sounds on our first and second albums, things were actually done manually The loops were triggered manually, so it was a long road to get to deliver your music. So POC and BVK's first 2 albums, the productions that I brought to the table was all done on here, and BVK's first 2 albums was all done on this machine as well.
Wow.
Yeah, so we really had to dig deep and become very, very creative as well.
And then when you guys were recording in the UK in the mid-90s, and even after that, such a rapid technological development in the producing space, then you have this. Now you can run 100 lines through your laptop. What was it like as a producer? Like
Sure.
trying to follow that technological development and remain creative while also exploring new ways to be creative?
Yeah. As a producer, your mind gets blown every time you walk into a space where people have the latest and the greatest technology and the gear, you know. The thing that really encouraged us and got us excited about recording in Maputo, Tswana is the fact that they had one of the most sophisticated recording studios on the planet. So the chances of us going there on our own steam and finding the budget to record there, that was practically zero. When we were presented with the opportunity through a deal to go there, of course, that was the main motivation, is to go and see these things and to feel it and to touch it and to record and to say, whoa, our album can be mixed down and mastered and we will have that same quality as Public Enemy. We'll come out with the same quality as NWA and Dre and all these guys. For us, that was the main thing. The politics that came with that was just by default, you know. And touring and landing this deal in the UK, we then managed to record in the UK as well. So you're seeing, I mean, you're working with engineers and you're working in production studios where Run DMC were recording, House of Pain, Africa Bambaataa, all the big names, our idols. They were sitting on that same couch. They were breathing that same studio air. So you can imagine what's going through your head, you know.
You're
as
much
a
more inspired but intimidated also.
I'm telling you, there's all these overwhelming feelings that's going on. You're like, yo, Run probably put his hand here, Jam Master Jay probably touched this button, let me touch that button, you know, there's that type of feeling, you know, because chances were in those days, man, it was difficult. Remember, there was no internet, there was no WhatsApp, there was no Twitter, you had very, very little access to instant media or even just connecting with people. So if you knew somebody that knew somebody that's even got a photo with somebody that you look up to, you wanted that photo because it's like, yo, I actually know somebody that took a photo with Quincy Jones. Yo, I can't believe it. Until the day came and we actually took a photo with Quincy Jones. We got pics and we ended up on stages with Lauryn Hill, with Will Smith, with all these big names. So, you know, this whole journey, it's like a roller coaster of emotions that's taking place. And for me, it's like the ocean. It's ongoing. It never stops. Even where I am today in terms of, you know, my career, working in radio, learning new things, interacting with different people, bringing different things, you know, to, if you want to call it the scene, the industry, the vibe, the environment, whatever, you're constantly going through motions all the time, you know. And for me, personally, once again, looking at technology and the evolution of actually making music and being a DJ in this day and age, there's no room for arrogance, you know, because there's always things to learn. You can never ever claim to be the best and to be comfortable right there, because tomorrow this can easily become obsolete. And we're already reaching that point right now. We can have a full sophisticated production suite just on your iPad, and you can now produce beats on your phone, and you can have the same quality that you can produce, you know, in a really expensive studio. The same with DJing. We're not just DJs anymore. So as you're DJing, you're actually acting out the role, or you're performing the role of a producer as well, because now we're chopping, we're remixing, we're rearranging compositions, you're bringing your expression to the gear. So we have so much more processing power. Now we got effects. I never thought the day would come where I could actually scratch a sound, sample it back, and all of this is happening in my set. And I can get from one track to the other so quick and so fast, and I can actually produce and chop and create drum patterns while I'm DJing. Because back then, I actually had to produce all those parts when I released my mixtapes and all that. And all my work in the 90s, it sounded, you know, really complex and new and fresh for that time, all of those things I had to go back and I had to spend hours splicing, chopping, producing, figuring it out, working out the timings, fixing up the mistakes with very, 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 very little track time or sampling time as well. But now I can do it all in one go. I just have to prep myself, know that I got the skills to do that, the drive and the imagination. Prep, boom, and here we go. One take and we're flying. You know, and tomorrow it's new technology, new tools, and we need to learn how to operate that in order for us to be at the top of our game.
I guess another way of removing the arrogance is to perform with the Fugees. It's to perform with James Brown. It's to perform with Quincy Jones.
Man, I'm the most phenomenal people that I've met throughout this journey. It's the names that you just mentioned right now. James Brown, the thing that I learned about James Brown was professionalism, what it means to be the best, and how to conduct yourself and how disciplined, mindful, and respectful you need to be for your craft and the people that you're working with. And in exchange, you got that same level of respect as well. He had dancers, drummers, the full backline, his backing singers, all his musicians, but the level of discipline was mind-bending. His dancers were warming up about 2 hours before he even came into the building. By the time that he came there, he just hit hand signals. And they jumped into various parts of the songs, and it didn't even sound like they were rehearsing. It actually sounded so tight.
This was the sound check, eh?
That's the sound check. And they all came dressed for the sound check as if it was the main performance. When the show came, show night in the Brixton Academy, we were the opening act. They came with a completely different, if you want to call it, attire. And James Brown's sidekick was there. So he was James Brown 24/7. And for me, but the respect and integrity was awesome. I got that same vibe from Lauryn Hill when we met the Fugees for the first time in Belgium. We didn't introduce ourselves to Lauryn Hill. She actually came up to us to introduce herself because she heard we were from Africa. And she was glad to exchange numbers. And I was like, well, this is very abnormal. This is like strange, but cool, we'll go with it. And based on that, they invited us to perform with them in Paris. And we ended up on the stage with them in Paris. And POC, especially Ishmael and Wycliffe, were busting out freestyles together backstage. That was phenomenal. The other really special experience that I got to put on the table very quickly, it's my encounters with Will Smith. I met him. I was actually invited to DJ at the wrap-up party of the Muhammad Ali movie. I went up there, DJed for him there. Will Smith came in. Of course, he had cameras following him. He came in before everyone else got there. And he was shaking hands, to whoever was at the party. He was doing his thing. As the party ramped up, I jumped onto the decks. It was my turn to play. A guy came to tap me on the shoulder. And he was like, yo, man, where's the mic? Where's the mic? And I'm like, who's this dude? And my manager came up and my manager told this guy to actually F off. And I looked around and I'm like, no, it's Jamie Foxx. You can't say that to Jamie Foxx. The guy still had dreads. I'm like, no, it's okay. And I was like, where's the mic? Give this dude the mic. And
you can't be serious.
Yeah, Jamie Foxx. And I was like, please talk to the engineer. He'll give you the mic. Took the mic, made the announcement. Will Smith came up. He was like, DJ, what's up? Do you know Jazzy Jeff? And I was like, of course I know Jazzy Jeff. And it's like, let's see what you can do. I dropped beats for him. I'll never forget it. I played the Watch Out Now break of Beat Nuts. I mixed that, 2 copies of that, and I created the beat, and he was busting out the freestyle. And he was like, have you got the Jiggy with it vinyl with you? And then he actually tested me, and he was like, my DJ Jazzy Jeff, what Jazzy Jeff is capable of? Let's see what you can do. And freak, I had to pull out everything. I had to once again dig deep, to show, and I was like, damn, for me that was mind blowing. And then the Jiggy record played, people were going mad. He was done with his performance. He went back into the crowd to go and dance and was dropping all these hip hop classics, DJ Cool and all this thing. Will Smith was going wild. And all these freaking high-level celebrities that were in the movie, all of them were at the party. When the party was done, Will Smith was the last man standing. He greeted each and everybody. He went up to the cleaners, he went to the caterers, he went to the waiters, he came up to me and all the DJs, and he thanked everybody. And that, for me, that was a testament there of a real professional, you know, somebody that understands the value of people, that understands the value of the craft and what it means, you know, to really be dedicated, you know, to the art form, and how mindful and respectful and how humble we need to be when we become a part of music. Yeah,
epic. So just reeling from that. It's completely incredible. So obviously all of that happened within this whirlwind of being overseas, and then you came back and you were doing lots of different things. You're establishing yourself as an independent solo brand, but also Brasafani Carp started to become the only hip-hop group on the label. What was the feeling like of starting an entire new hip-hop project after POC and then starting BVK?